What's going on, everybody? So today I'll be going over Sparkle and if she is still meta as of 2025. Now, a lot of people are trying to make the argument that Sparkle has fallen off, the worst aging, most power crept 5-star in Honkai Star Rail. Guys, listen. I understand that we love throwing the term power creep around in this community, but it gets to a point, and you can kind of tell where I'm getting at here. Sparkle has not been power crept. She has not fallen off. She's still incredible. At E0, S0, maybe a little bit more difficult to get up and running, but if you have her at E0, S1, easy tier 0.5 minimum. And falling down, let's just address this right now. A character falling down from tier 0 to tier 0.5 is not power creep. Let's just get that out of the way, right? That is not, we're not calling that power creep. And if we are, yikes. But anyways, right, Sparkle has definitely fallen down from tier 0 to tier 0.5, but as somebody who is used to absurd power creep, right, somebody who used to play Honkai Impact and do the end game in that game, for me personally, it's nothing new. So I think that, you know, from a year until now, right, it's been over a year since Sparkle came out. I think that she's lasted a pretty good while in the meta, and she is still ongoing to this day like crazy. Would I recommend a new player to pick Sparkle over Sunday? Honestly, it's not the most optimal, but if Sparkle had a banner and Sunday had no signs of getting any kind of rerun, maybe he literally just got a rerun 2 patches prior, right? So he's not going to be coming back for a while. In a case like that, I would recommend Sparkle. I wouldn't strongly recommend it by any means, but I would say that Sparkle would be an option for a beginner to pick if Sunday won't be coming back for quite some time. And of course, the only other hyper carry harmony or support unit is RMC, but even then, RMC just isn't quite fully there yet, in my opinion. Definitely a great unit, obviously, don't get me wrong. I'd pick RMC over Bronya, but really, you can kind of tell where I'm getting at here, right? Sparkle is not as good as Sunday, but a lot of people are exaggerating the difference in kit between these two characters, right? People are trying to make the argument that Sunday to Sparkle is like the Herda to Jingliu. Guys, absolutely not. If Sunday's tier 0, then Sparkle's tier 0.5. What I'm trying to get at here is that Sparkle is almost on par with Sunday, but I will say this, right? The reason, right, the real reason why Sparkle is feeling like she's fallen off or has been power crept is because she just doesn't really fit into a lot of team comps. It's not like a Silverwolf situation. Right now, Silverwolf just sucks. It has nothing to do with meta. She's just a bad unit. But the thing with Sparkle is that you can't pair her with Aglaya or Casters because of the way that Sparkle functions in relative to those two DPSs, right? Sparkle's kit just doesn't really allow it. She only has 50% action advance, which honestly, for some characters, that's not even an issue. For Aglaya and Casters, it kind of is, right? That, along with the fact that Sunday can increase he gives additional damage increase if the wearer has a summon. So with Caceres and Aglaya, by default, Sunday is going to be significantly better than Sparkle. It's not going to be close. And with somebody like Mighty, right, because, you know, he auto battles and all this kind of stuff, it's not really, Sparkle doesn't really quite work with him as well as some other characters. Like, I'd definitely pick Triby over Sparkle if I'm gonna run Mighty. Not that I have Mighty, but you still get what I mean, right? I'd probably pick Red May over Sparkle to use for Mighty. So there's not a lot of modern DPSs that really work with Sparkle. But here's the thing, right? Sparkle synergizes essentially perfectly with the #1 DPS in the game right now, the Herda. The Herda is so flexible, and honestly, the Herda is single-handedly carrying Sparkle in this current meta. If Sparkle couldn't work with the Herda, I would say that she has fallen off. Not been power cut, but definitely has fallen off. Because without the Herda, there wouldn't be any team comps where Sparkle will go crazy. You get what I mean, right? Sparkle works really well with the Herda. She works really well if you're trying to use her in pure fiction, right? Maybe with mini Herda. That is definitely an option. It's not anything crazy, but you could definitely run 4-star Herda and Sparkle. Get some funky stuff going on, especially if you have a really well-built Sparkle. Which is another thing, right? That is absolutely another thing that I want to address in this video. If you are pulling meta 5 stars every patch, you are not giving yourself enough time to go back and min-max your older units, which is why they feel like they've fallen off, when really you haven't spent enough time investing into them. My Sparkle has 143 speed and 301 crit damage, and I feel like everybody who has Sparkle should have her at the right speed. Of course, with a unit like Sparkle, you're going to need to speed tune her. There is no doubt, no questions asked. You need to speed tune Sparkle, right? You know, not just because of the 50% action advance, but you know, because of how your characters work, right? It depends on your team comps at the end of the day, and 300% crit damage should be a must for anybody who has Sparkle. Generally, I'd recommend that you have the best in slot like tone of a Harmony unit, because that Harmony unit should be lasting quite some time in the meta, which is the last thing I want to talk about in this video. So people are saying the Honkai Star Rail has some absurd power creep. I already made a video going over my thoughts on the power creep, so I'm not going to talk about it too much in this video. But generally, right, you will be replacing your DPSs over time, but Harmony units should be here to stay, right? Tribi is ridiculous in some team comps, but in a lot of team comps with the more modern DPSs, Ren Mei is a perfectly viable option over somebody like Tribi or even Robin, right? Well, what I'm trying to get at here is that every limited Harmony unit in this game right now is still bonkers, right? They are still great, they're still viable, they're still cracked. Ren Mei is ridiculous, Sparkle is ridiculous, Robin is ridiculous. They're all phenomenal when it comes to supporting units. It's just that different Harmony units synergize with different team comps, and it is kind of hard to use an older unit in a newer team comp when those characters don't really allow it. You get what I mean? For example, Aventurine is still crazy. He's still easily tier 0, probably tier -1 with how good he is, but you can't use him with Casterus, which is, you know, really the last thing I want to talk about in this video. Honkai Star Rail is all about team synergy, and pulling from meta units, but just because they're meta, is not really going to get you as far in the endgame as you might hope. Yes, you will be able to max star, but that's not going to last for too long because of all the factors that I talked about in this video. Honkai Star Rail is a team building game. Sparkle is still crazy, you just need to fit her in the right team comp. I understand that she only has 50% action advance and Sunday has 100%, but I didn't see this argument when Sparkle first came out, and I understand that DPSs now are different than how they were when Sparkle first came out, but that doesn't change the fact that still, once again, with the right team comps, not only can Sparkle still synergize really well with the DPS, but you can also find workarounds to that 50% action advance. You need to speed tune properly, not just speed, but you need to tune all of your stats in according to the characters on your team. Your builds need to be different depending on where you're using these characters or who you're using them with. But that's about it for this video. There is not a whole lot else to say, right? Sparkle's crazy. It's just at the end of the day, there's not a whole lot of modern team comps where she will really fit that well because of the current summon meta, AoE meta, primarily because of the summon DPSs that have been coming out, which is like every other patch, which is kind of crazy. But we are not going to get our Remembrance DPS for a long time moving forward. So the future DPSs may be able to work more properly with Sparkle, right? Archer seems like he'll work well with Sparkle. Finon may be able to synergize with Sparkle depending on how his kit comes out in the finalized version. We have no information on Saber, and I'm not too sure about any DPSs that'll come out after that, but I guarantee you that DPSs that release past version 3.4 will be able to synergize with Sparkle better than the newer DPSs now, with the exception of the Herda, right? It's just this little time period where Sparkle has fallen off, but she has not been power crept. This is just once again another way to fuel the Honkai Star Rail power creep agenda. I strongly disagree with this agenda in its entirety, honestly, but I already made a video going over this, so I won't rant about that once again in this video. But there's not much else to say. I would still recommend Sparkle for people who don't have her. If you have Sparkle and you don't have Sunday, you don't need to replace your Sparkle with Sunday. I'll say that right now, speaking as somebody who did not replace their Sparkle with Sunday and still uses Sparkle in every single endgame reset as a free-to-play and max star everything. But that's about it for this video. Not much else to say. I'll see y'all. Goodbye.